That Monday morning, I walked into corporate headquarters with my coffee still steaming. 3 years I'd spent climbing to strategic management, sacrificing love, family, and youth to prove I belonged here. But in one meeting, a woman who'd never shed a drop of sweat for this company dragged me down to nothing. She wasn't my boss, wasn't my colleague, she was the CEO's wife. And she decided I was too ambitious for my own good. My name is Emily Rhodes. And at 32, I'd already lived more lives than most people do by retirement, growing up in a Rust Belt town outside Detroit, where the factories had long since shuttered and left behind empty shells of the American dream. I learned early that nobody was going to hand me anything. My father worked double shifts at the remaining auto parts plant. My mother cleaned offices at night. College wasn't a given. It was a mountain I had to climb with bloodied fingernails, one scholarship application at a time. The gleaming towers of Horizon Capital in downtown Chicago felt like another planet from where I'd started. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Lake Michigan. Italian marble lined the hallways. And the executive floor smelled like expensive leather and old money. 3 years ago, when I'd first walked through these doors as a junior analyst, I'd worn my only suit, a clearance rack find I'd altered myself. Now, as head of strategic planning, I could afford the designer wardrobe, but I never forgot the hunger that brought me here. My office on the 32nd floor was modest by executive standards, but represented everything I'd fought for. Awards lined the bookshelf. Rising Star 2023. Excellence in Strategic Innovation. Each one a battle scar from 70-hour weeks. Missed birthdays. Relationships that withered because I chose spreadsheets over dinner dates. I'd made Horizon Capital $15 million last quarter alone through a restructuring plan everyone said was too aggressive. The numbers didn't lie, even if everything else in this building did. Daniel Prescott commanded the corner office 3 floors up. At 45, he was the embodiment of corporate masculinity, silver-touched temples, marathon runner's build, Harvard MBA prominently displayed. He'd inherited his position from his father, but had genuinely grown the company's portfolio from $2 billion to $12 billion in assets under management. I respected him for that, even admired his vision. When he'd personally promoted me 6 months ago, shaking my hand and saying I represented the future of Horizon, I'd actually believed corporate meritocracy might exist. Then I met his wife. Vivian Prescott swept into the office one Thursday afternoon like she owned it. Which, in a way, she did. Her family's trust held 18% of Horizon's shares. Blonde hair that probably cost more to maintain than my monthly rent. A casual Hermes bag worth more than most people's cars. And eyes that assessed and dismissed you in the same glance. She didn't work here, had no official title, but somehow appeared at strategic meetings, her manicured fingers drumming on the conference table as she offered suggestions that sounded more like commands. "You must be Emily," she'd said during our first encounter, her smile sharp as winter ice. "Daniel talks about you constantly, says you're quite the little climber." Little climber. 2 words that told me everything about how she saw me, not as a strategic director who'd saved the company millions, but as an insect scaling her mansion walls. The office culture shifted when Vivian was around. Executives who normally strutted through the halls became deferential, almost fearful. Administrative assistants scattered. Even Daniel seemed diminished, his commanding presence shrinking to accommodate whatever space his wife decided to occupy. I watched it all with the detached fascination of an anthropologist, filing away observations that would soon become survival intelligence. My team respected me, 5 analysts who'd followed me through corporate hell and back. We worked in the trenches together, building models until our eyes burned, tearing apart competitor strategies like wolves with prey. They knew I'd shield them from corporate politics, take the heat when projects went sideways, and share credit when we succeeded. That loyalty, I'd learn, would matter more than any strategic plan I'd ever designed. The January wind whipped against the windows as I reviewed our latest presentation, the Chicago skyline glittering with false promises. Tomorrow's board meeting would determine the company's 5-year trajectory. And my strategic overhaul was the centerpiece. Every number triple-checked, every projection conservative but compelling. This was my moment to prove that a girl from nowhere could reshape the future of a $12 billion company. I didn't know that Vivian Prescott had already decided my future, or that in her world, talent was just another threat to be eliminated. The boardroom on the 40th floor was designed to intimidate, a massive oak table that could seat 20, portraits of former CEOs watching like judges, and a view of Chicago that made you feel like you were deciding the fate of the city itself. I'd arrived an hour early, setting up my presentation materials with the precision of a surgeon preparing for surgery. Each slide was a piece of ammunition in my war for the company's future. By 9 a.m., the room filled with suits and skepticism. Board members filed in, 12 faces that controlled billions in assets. Daniel took his position at the head of the table, giving me an encouraging nod. Then, unexpectedly, Vivian glided in, taking a seat along the wall as if she belonged there. She wasn't supposed to be here. This was a closed board meeting. "Gentlemen, ladies," Daniel began. "Emily has prepared a comprehensive strategic overhaul that could position Horizon for unprecedented growth." I stood, my confidence armor-plated after weeks of preparation. The first 20 minutes went flawlessly. I walked them through market analysis, competitor weaknesses, untapped opportunities in emerging markets. The board members leaned forward, engaged, asking sharp questions I fielded with data-backed responses. We were discussing the restructuring of our Asia-Pacific division when Vivian's voice cut through the room like a scalpel. "May I offer an observation?" The room turned to her. Daniel's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Please, Vivian," he said, though it sounded more like a plea than permission. She stood, moving to the windows with theatrical grace. "Ms. Rhodes is clearly ambitious. The presentation is aggressive, perhaps overly so. But my concern isn't with the numbers." She turned, fixing me with a smile that never reached her eyes. "It's with the person presenting them." My stomach dropped, but I kept my face neutral. "I'm not sure I understand, Mrs. Prescott. Don't you?" She laughed, a tinkling sound like breaking glass. "You've been here 3 years. In that time, you've systematically eliminated or sidelined anyone you perceive as competition. The Brennan incident, the Morrison review, you play corporate politics with the subtlety of a sledgehammer. The Brennan incident, where I'd reported a colleague for insider trading. The Morrison review, where I'd exposed inflated performance metrics. Both legitimate actions that had protected the company, now twisted into weapons against me. Furthermore," Vivian continued, "several female employees have expressed discomfort with your management style. Too aggressive, they say. Too demanding, creating a hostile work environment." This was a lie. My team would walk through fire for me, and I'd mentored more women in this company than anyone else at my level. But I saw the board members exchanging glances, doubt creeping in like poison. "I have documentation," I started. "I'm sure you do." Vivian interrupted. "You document everything, don't you? Every conversation, every email, building your little cases against people. It's paranoid behavior. Frankly, unhealthy for team dynamics." Daniel cleared his throat. "Perhaps we should focus on the strategic plan." "The strategic plan is only as good as the person executing it," Vivian said, now addressing the board directly. "Can Horizon afford to bet its future on someone who bulldozes through corporate culture, who alienates staff, who treats this company like her personal conquest rather than a collaborative enterprise?" Board member Richard Steinberg, whose opinion carried enormous weight, frowned. "These are serious concerns. Daniel, were you aware of these issues?" Daniel looked trapped between his wife and his integrity. "Emily's performance metrics have been exceptional." "Performance at what cost?" Vivian pressed. "I've been conducting informal discussions with staff. The stress levels in strategic planning are unprecedented. People are afraid to speak up, afraid of retaliation." My hands clenched under the table. Every word was calculated assassination, impossible to defend against without looking defensive. If I fought back, I'd seem aggressive, proving her point. If I stayed silent, I'd seem guilty. I think, said Margaret Hall, the longest-serving board member, we need to table this presentation until these concerns can be properly investigated. I agree, Vivian said quickly. And in the interest of stability, perhaps Ms. Rhodes should be reassigned during the investigation. Something less prominent. The junior analyst pool could benefit from her intensity. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Junior analyst pool. 3 rungs down from where I'd started. It wasn't just a demotion. It was humiliation designed to force me out. Daniel's face had gone pale. That seems rather extreme. Does it? Vivian's voice turned steel. When the company's reputation is at stake? The vote was swift, brutal. 7-5 in favor of immediate reassignment pending investigation. I stood there, my revolutionary strategic plan still glowing on the screen behind me, watching 3 years of blood and sacrifice evaporate in minutes. Emily, Daniel said quietly, unable to meet my eyes. HR will discuss the transition with you. We appreciate your understanding. Understanding. As if I should thank them for this execution. I gathered my materials with steady hands, though inside I was screaming. As I reached the door, Vivian called out with false sweetness. This is for your own good, Emily. Sometimes we need to learn humility before we can truly lead. The elevator ride down felt like descending into hell, each floor counting down my professional death. By the time I reached my office, my former office, security was already there with boxes. The cardboard box on my kitchen counter contained 3 years of my life, awards that now felt like mockeries. A coffee mug with a motivational quote that seemed sardonic, and a framed photo of my team from last year's Christmas party. Everyone smiling, unaware that loyalty meant nothing in Vivian Prescott's kingdom. I'd been home for 2 hours, still wearing my presentation suit like armor I couldn't bear to remove. My phone buzzed with messages I couldn't bring myself to read. The word had already spread through Horizon like wildfire. Emily Rhodes, fallen from grace, demoted to entry-level obscurity. I could imagine the whispers in the break rooms, the relieved sighs from those who'd seen me as competition. The shock from those who'd believed, like I had, that hard work actually mattered. The wine bottle opened too easily. Merlot dark as the Chicago sky outside my window. My apartment, which I'd been so proud of, Lincoln Park, doorman building, evidence of my success, now felt like a cage. Every piece of furniture, every designer item I'd carefully saved for, screamed of the person I used to be yesterday. The person who believed she could outwork prejudice, outmaneuver privilege, outsmart a system designed to keep people like me in their place. By the 3rd glass, I finally checked my phone. Most messages were variations of shock and empty sympathy. Can't believe it. So unfair. Let me know if you need anything. The last one always made me laugh bitterly. Nobody wanted to be seen helping the fallen. Corporate leprosy was contagious. But 3 messages stood out. My team, Marcus, Janet, and Kyle, had written simply, "We know the truth. We're with you." Small comfort, but comfort nonetheless. Tuesday morning, I returned to Horizon because I needed the paycheck, needed health insurance, needed to not give Vivian the satisfaction of my resignation. My new desk was on the 7th floor, in a corner that smelled like old coffee and broken dreams. A cubicle, actually, not even a desk. The nameplate read E. Rhodes, Junior Analyst, in font so small you had to squint to see it. My new supervisor, Brad Thompson, was 26 years old and had failed the Series 7 exam twice. I'd hired him 18 months ago as a favor to someone, and now he stood over me, awkwardly explaining my new duties, data entry, formatting reports, fetching coffee for client meetings I'd once led. "I know this is weird," Brad mumbled, unable to make eye contact. "But I'm sure it's temporary." We both knew he was lying. The worst part wasn't the menial work or the humiliation. It was the isolation. People I'd worked with for years suddenly developed selective blindness. Conversations stopped when I approached. Lunch invitations evaporated. Even the security guards, who used to greet me by name, now looked through me like I was furniture. Only the newest employees, those who didn't know my history, would interact normally. And even they were quickly warned off by veterans. I ate lunch alone in the parking garage, sitting in my car like a teenager hiding from high school bullies. The strategic plan I developed, my masterpiece, was being presented to clients by someone else. My name scrubbed from every slide. They'd even removed my signature from the financial models I'd built. Thursday afternoon. I saw Vivian in the lobby. She was holding court with a group of executives' wives, all of them draped in designer clothing and practiced smiles. She saw me waiting for the elevator, the executive express I could no longer use, forced to queue for the regular ones, and her smile widened. "Emily," she called out, loud enough for everyone to hear. "How are you adjusting to your new role? I hope it's not too stressful. We worry about your work-life balance." The other women tittered, recognizing blood in the water. I forced my face into neutrality. Years of poverty-trained pride keeping my spine straight. "It's educational, Mrs. Prescott. I'm learning so much about the foundation of our operations." "How wonderful. There's something to be said for starting over, isn't there? Fresh perspectives and all that." Starting over, as if I'd chosen this. As if she hadn't orchestrated every second of my fall. That night, I sat in my bathroom, scissors in hand, staring at my reflection. The woman looking back seemed older, defeated. I'd thought about cutting my hair, changing something, anything, to mark this transformation from executive to nobody. But that would be admitting defeat. Instead, I set the scissors down and pulled out a legal pad. If Vivian thought she'd broken me, she'd miscalculated. I'd grown up in a town where the American dream had died and been buried, where families survived on food stamps and false hope. I'd studied by candlelight when the power got cut off, walked 5 miles to the library in snowstorms to use their computers for scholarship applications. I'd survived poverty, institutional sexism, and every glass ceiling they'd tried to trap me under. One manipulative socialite with a trust fund wasn't going to be my ending. I started writing every incident, every witness, every policy Vivian had violated by being in that boardroom, by making those accusations without evidence. The wrongful demotion, the defamation, the hostile work environment she'd created while accusing me of the same. Somewhere in this city, there had to be someone who cared more about competence than connections. I just had to find them before Vivian finished destroying what was left of me. Friday evening, 2 weeks into my humiliation, I was working late, not because Brad required it, but because the 7th floor was peaceful after hours, free from pitying looks and whispered conversations. I was formatting spreadsheets, work an intern could do blindfolded, when I heard footsteps in the empty hallway. Margaret Hall appeared in my cubicle entrance, 73 years old and formidable as a Supreme Court justice. "Working late, Miss Rhodes?" I stood quickly, unsure why she was here, 7 floors below the executive realm. "Mrs. Hall, I was just..." "Sit." She pulled over a chair from an empty cubicle, the wheels squeaking against cheap carpet. "Do you know why I voted against your demotion?" My throat tightened. I wasn't aware of the individual votes. "I've been on this board for 22 years. I've seen countless executives rise and fall. Most deserve their fate." She studied me with eyes that had witnessed decades of corporate warfare. "You don't." The kindness in her words nearly broke me. I'd held myself together through 2 weeks of humiliation, but compassion was harder to bear than cruelty. "Vivian Prescott," Margaret continued, "is a cancer in this company. Her husband is brilliant with numbers but weak with people, especially her. She's destroyed 3 careers before yours. Always women, always rising stars who threatened her sense of importance." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because the board knows your value, Emily. At least, the members who matter do. But knowing and acting are different things when 18% of shares sit in Vivian's family trust. She leaned forward. You need to prove your worth so undeniably that we can't ignore it. Make yourself indispensable again, but this time, bulletproof. How? I'm filing reports and fetching coffee. I don't have access to strategic data anymore. No team, no resources. You have a brain that saved this company $15 million last quarter. Use it. Margaret stood, then paused. The Malaysian Sovereign Wealth Fund deal, nobody can crack it. The team assigned to it is floundering. If someone were to, say, develop a breakthrough approach in their spare time. She left the sentence hanging, walking away before I could respond. The Malaysian deal, I knew about it from before my fall. 300 million in potential investment. But they wanted terms that seemed impossible to reconcile with SEC regulations. The current team had been working on it for 6 months with no progress. I stayed until 3 a.m. that night, using my old passwords that IT hadn't revoked yet to access public filings, international trade agreements, Malaysian investment patterns. By Sunday night, I had a framework, not complete, but enough to see the path forward. The Malaysians weren't actually concerned about SEC regulations. They were worried about Sharia compliance in their investment structure. Everyone was solving the wrong problem. Monday morning, I arrived early and left the framework, unsigned, on Daniel's desk. By noon, the entire 40th floor was buzzing. Someone had solved the Malaysian puzzle, found the key everyone had missed. Daniel called an emergency meeting with the team handling the deal, trying to determine who'd had the breakthrough. I kept my head down, formatting Brad's pathetic reports, playing invisible. But I watched as they implemented my framework, as the Malaysians responded positively, as momentum built toward a deal that would be the largest single investment in Horizon's history. Wednesday night, working late again. I found Margaret Hall in my cubicle once more. Clever, she said simply, but you need to sign your work. If I claim credit now, Vivian will sabotage it. She'll find a way to twist it, make it seem like I'm overstepping, violating my demotion terms. Then you need something she can't twist, something public, undeniable, with witnesses she can't intimidate or buy. The quarterly shareholders' meeting. It was 3 weeks away, open to all employees who held stock, which included me, thanks to my old compensation package. Media would be present, industry analysts, people beyond Vivian's reach. That's a dangerous game, Margaret warned, reading my thoughts. If you fail, I'm already at the bottom, Mrs. Hall. The only direction is up or out. She smiled then, the first genuine warmth I'd seen from any executive since my demotion. There's a reason I've survived 22 years on this board, Emily. I pick my battles and my allies carefully. Don't disappoint me. After she left, I sat in my cheap cubicle, surrounded by the ghosts of my ambition, and began planning. I had 3 weeks to build something that couldn't be ignored, stolen, or destroyed. 3 weeks to prove that talent, not marriage certificates or trust funds, should determine who shaped this company's future. I thought about Vivian in her Lincoln Park mansion, probably planning her next charity gala, secure in her victory. She'd made one crucial mistake. She'd left me alive in the building, demoted, humiliated, but still here, still fighting. My computer screen glowed in the empty office as I opened a new document. Project Resurrection. I typed, then deleted it. Too dramatic. Instead, I wrote simply, Horizon Capital. A 5-year vision for market domination. This time, I wouldn't just present a plan, I'd present a revolution. And I'd make sure everyone, board members, shareholders, media, and especially Vivian Prescott, would be watching when I did. The rumors started small. Whispers in the bathroom that went silent when I entered. Then, they grew teeth. Emily Rhodes is unstable. She's been stalking board members. She threatened Vivian Prescott's children. Each lie more vicious than the last, spreading through Horizon's halls like poison gas. I knew Vivian's handiwork. She'd done this before to others, character assassination by 1,000 cuts. My computer access was revoked on Monday morning, IT claiming a security review. My company phone was remotely wiped Tuesday afternoon. By Wednesday, Brad informed me I was being moved to the basement filing room. Temporary reorganization, he mumbled, unable to look me in the eye. The basement had no windows, no cell service, and conveniently, no witnesses. That evening, walking to my car in the parking garage, I noticed footsteps echoing mine. 2 men in expensive suits, keeping pace 30 feet behind. When I stopped, they stopped. When I turned, they studied their phones. Private security, probably hired to intimidate. I took photos with my personal phone, their faces caught in the fluorescent lighting. Thursday brought an email from HR. I was under investigation for inappropriate contact with board members and violation of demotion protocols. Any further contact with executives would result in immediate termination. Margaret Hall was specifically named as someone I was forbidden from approaching. They were boxing me in, cutting off my oxygen. But Vivian had gotten cocky. That afternoon, she appeared in the basement filing room with 2 of her charity committee friends, giving them a tour that conveniently stopped at my desk. "This is where we put problematic employees for rehabilitation," she explained, as if I were an exhibit in a zoo. Sometimes people need to be reminded of their place in the ecosystem. One of her friends, a redhead dripping in diamonds, laughed nervously. "Isn't that a bit harsh?" "Harsh?" Vivian's voice turned cold. "This woman tried to seduce my husband. Daniel was too kind to fire her outright, but we needed to protect him and the company from her predatory behavior." The lie was so outrageous I actually laughed, looking up from the files I was organizing. "That's slander, Mrs. Prescott, and your friends are witnesses." Vivian's face flushed. "Are you threatening me?" "I'm stating a legal fact. You just made a false accusation in front of witnesses." I turned to her friends. "I'm Emily Rhodes. 3 weeks ago, I was head of strategic planning. My demotion came immediately after I presented a plan that would have reduced executive bonuses to fund expansion. You can verify this with public board meeting minutes." The redhead looked uncomfortable, stepping back. The other friend, a brunette with intelligent eyes, was studying me carefully. "Come." Vivian snapped at them. "We don't engage with delusional people." After they left, I found a note tucked under my keyboard. No signature, just an address and a time. Café Luna, 8 p.m. Café Luna was a small Italian place in Wicker Park, far from Horizon's sphere of influence. The brunette from earlier sat in a corner booth, no diamonds now, just jeans and a Northwestern University sweatshirt. "I'm Patricia Huang," she said as I sat down. "I'm a journalist with the Financial Times, working on a piece about corporate governance in Chicago's financial sector." My pulse quickened, but I kept my face neutral. "Why are you friends with Vivian?" "I'm not. I'm investigating her. 3 sources have told me similar stories. Talented women destroyed after crossing her path. You're the first one still fighting." Patricia slid a folder across the table. Inside were documents, emails between Vivian and various board members, financial records showing suspicious payments from company accounts to Vivian's personal charity, transcripts of conversations where she discussed removing obstacles to her influence. "How did you?" Vivian's assistant, Maria, has a daughter with special needs. When Vivian tried to have Maria fired for taking too many medical days, Maria started keeping records. Everything. This was it, the ammunition I needed. But Patricia wanted something in return. "I need someone to go on record, someone currently inside Horizon who can verify these patterns." The shareholders' meeting would be the perfect venue, public, recorded, with media present. If I do that before the meeting, they'll fire me immediately. Then we do it at the meeting itself. You present your case, I publish simultaneously. They can't suppress both of us. Friday morning. I found my desk surrounded by security boxes. Brad, looking miserable, informed me I was being relocated again, this time to an off-site storage facility in Cicero, to assist with archive digitization. It was exile, pure and simple. No computer access, no contact with current files, just dusty boxes in a warehouse. "This came from Daniel himself," Brad whispered. I'm sorry, Emily. I tried to object, but Vivian had won this round, or thought she had. The storage facility was a blessing in disguise. No supervision, no security cameras, just me and 40 years of Horizon's history, including records from previous problematic employees. I found 3 names Patricia hadn't. Women who'd been erased so thoroughly their employment records were sealed. Each one had been promoted by Daniel. Each one had threatened Vivian's influence. Each one had been destroyed within 6 months. I photographed everything, building a case that went beyond personal vendetta to a pattern of corporate malfeasance. Vivian wasn't just protecting her ego, she was protecting something bigger. The charity payments Patricia had found were just the beginning. Sunday night, my phone rang. Unknown number. Stop. Vivian's voice, cold as winter wind. Whatever you think you're doing, stop. You have no idea what you're playing with. I know exactly what I'm playing with. The question is, do you? I will destroy you, Emily. Not just your career, your life, your family back in Michigan. That little auto parts plant where your father works. One phone call and it closes. Your student loans. I can have them called in tomorrow. Your apartment lease, your car loan, your... I hit record on my second phone, capturing every threat. Keep talking, Vivian, please. The line went dead. The Palmer House Hilton's grand ballroom gleamed with crystal chandeliers and false promises. 300 shareholders filled round tables, their combined net worth exceeding the GDP of small nations. I stood at the back, wearing my best suit, the one I'd bought for my promotion celebration that never happened. My shareholder pass hung around my neck like a badge of defiance. Daniel was at the podium, walking through quarterly projections with practiced ease. Vivian sat in the front row, radiant in cream Chanel, playing the supportive wife while her eyes scanned the room like a predator's. She hadn't seen me yet. I'd arrived late, slipped in during the opening remarks. The Q&A session began in 20 minutes. That was my window. Patricia Huang sat 3 tables from the front, press credentials visible, her phone ready. We'd coordinated our strike. She would publish the moment I began speaking, making it impossible for Horizon to bury the story. Now, Daniel announced, we'll take questions from shareholders. Hands rose throughout the room. Daniel pointed to safe choices, elderly investors asking about dividends, fund managers confirming technical details. 15 minutes passed, then 10. My window was closing. I stood and raised my hand. Daniel's eyes found me, and his face went white. Vivian turned, following his gaze, and her expression shifted from surprise to rage to something like fear. Yes, Daniel said, his voice cracking slightly. Question in the back. I walked toward the microphone in the center aisle, each step measured, filmed by multiple phones as people recognized the drama unfolding. Emily Rhodes, shareholder and current employee. My question concerns governance oversight and financial irregularities in executive spending. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Vivian started to stand, but Margaret Hall, seated nearby, placed a firm hand on her arm. Specifically, I continued, my voice carrying clear and strong. Can you explain why $300,000 in company funds were transferred to the Prescott Family Foundation last quarter, categorized as consultant fees, when no consulting work was documented? The room erupted. Daniel gripped the podium, knuckles white. I'm not aware of any such transfers. I have the documentation here. I held up my folder, thick with evidence, along with records of 4 female executives whose careers were terminated after questioning similar transactions. Would you like me to read their names? This is inappropriate, Vivian's voice shrieked across the ballroom. She'd broken free from Margaret's grip, storming toward me. This woman is mentally unstable, currently under investigation for harassment and... For harassment? I turned to face her, making sure my voice reached every corner. Like the harassment Maria Gonzalez documented? Your former assistant who recorded you threatening to have her deported if she didn't alter financial records? Vivian stopped mid-stride, her face draining of color. Or the harassment Jennifer Wu experienced before her suspicious resignation? Or Catherine Brown, or Sarah Martinez. Each name landed like a hammer blow. All rising executives, all women, all destroyed after questioning your influence over company operations despite holding no official position. Board members were standing now, some shouting for security, others demanding answers. Patricia's fingers flew across her phone. The story was live, spreading across financial networks in real time. Furthermore, I said, pulling out my phone, I have a recording of Mrs. Prescott threatening my family, my father's employment, my financial accounts, all to prevent me from attending this meeting. I hit play. Vivian's voice filled the ballroom, venomous and clear. I will destroy you. Emily, not just your career, your life, your family back in Michigan. The recording played for 45 seconds that felt like hours. When it ended, the silence was deafening. Richard Steinberg stood slowly. Daniel, I move for an emergency board session. Immediately. Seconded, Margaret Hall announced, her voice cutting through the chaos. Vivian turned on her husband. Do something. But Daniel was staring at me, and in his eyes I saw not anger, but something like relief. The emergency session is granted, he said quietly. Then, louder. This meeting is adjourned. Board members, please convene in the executive conference room. Security approached me, but Margaret Hall intercepted them. Ms. Rhodes is coming with us. She's a material witness. As we filed out, Vivian grabbed my arm, her nails digging in. You have no idea what you've done. The connections I have, the power. The power you had, I corrected, pulling free. Past tense. Patricia appeared beside us, her phone recording. Mrs. Prescott, would you care to comment on the allegations of embezzlement and wrongful termination? Vivian's carefully constructed mask finally shattered completely. She lunged at Patricia's phone, screaming obscenities that would make tomorrow's headlines. Security intervened, pulling her back as shareholders filmed every second. In the elevator to the executive floor, Margaret Hall stood beside me. That was either the bravest or stupidest thing I've witnessed in 40 years of business. Maybe both, I admitted. My hands finally starting to shake as adrenaline faded. The board will need a new head of strategic planning, she said, studying the climbing floor numbers. Someone with proven courage and unquestionable integrity. Interested? Before I could answer, the elevator doors opened to the executive floor. Through the glass walls, I could see Vivian in Daniel's office, gesticulating wildly while lawyers surrounded her. Daniel sat at his desk, head in his hands, his empire crumbling around him. The revolution had begun. The executive conference room had become a war zone. Lawyers from 3 different firms crowded around the table, documents spreading like blood across the polished wood. Vivian sat at one end, her attorney whispering urgently in her ear, while Daniel occupied the other, looking like he'd aged 10 years in 10 minutes. The evidence is overwhelming, Richard Steinberg announced, holding up Patricia's freshly printed article. The Financial Times story alone has crashed our pre-market trading. We're looking at a SEC investigation, possible criminal charges, and a shareholder lawsuit that could destroy this company. This is a witch hunt. Vivian slammed her manicured hand on the table. Orchestrated by a disgruntled employee who couldn't handle demotion. Every transaction was authorized. By whom? Margaret Hall interrupted. You have no signing authority. Vivian, you're not an employee, officer, or board member. Yet here's your signature on 17 different transfers. I sat quietly, letting the evidence speak. Maria Gonzalez had arrived, wheeling in boxes of documentation she'd secretly copied over 2 years. Each box was labeled threatening communications, forged authorizations, wrongful terminations. Maria's hands shook as she placed them on the table, but her voice was steady when she spoke. Mrs. Prescott told me I'd be deported if I didn't comply. My daughter needs specialized medical care only available here. I had no choice but to document everything for protection. Lies! Vivian stood, her designer composure cracking. Daniel, tell them. You approved everything. The foundation work, the consultancy fees, it was all for the company's benefit. Daniel finally looked up, and his expression was hollow. I approved nothing. I suspected, but I chose not to look. I thought if I kept you happy with your charities and social position, you'd leave the business alone. You pathetic. Vivian started toward him, but her lawyer grabbed her arm. Mrs. Prescott, I strongly advise. I don't care about your advice, she wheeled on the board. Do you know who I am? My family built half this city. One call to my father and every one of your companies loses their credit lines. I'll bury all of you. Your father, Margaret said calmly, called us an hour ago. He's withdrawn all family support from you, effective immediately. Apparently, he's been monitoring the situation and is, quote, disgusted by your behavior and its impact on the family name. The color drained from Vivian's face. No, he wouldn't. He did. He also froze the trust fund's pending investigation. Richard pulled out his phone, showing a message. He's recommending full cooperation with authorities to minimize damage. Vivian collapsed into her chair, the fight suddenly gone. For a moment, I almost felt pity. Then I remembered Jennifer Wu, who'd attempted suicide after Vivian destroyed her career. Catherine Brown, who'd lost her house fighting wrongful termination. Sarah Martinez, who'd fled to Europe to escape the blacklisting. The board has voted, Richard announced. Effective immediately. Daniel Prescott is placed on administrative leave pending investigation. Vivian Prescott is banned from all Horizon properties and events. Any attempts to contact employees will be considered harassment. As for you, Margaret turned to me. The board formally apologizes for the wrongful demotion. You're reinstated to your previous position with back pay. Plus, damages to be determined. However, she paused. We're actually hoping you'll consider a different role. Daniel stood abruptly. I need to say something. His voice was broken but determined. Emily, what you did today took more courage than I've shown in 20 years. I let my wife destroy talented people because I was too weak to stop her. You deserve my position more than I ever did. The room went silent. Even Vivian stared at her husband in shock. The board agrees, Richard said slowly. We're prepared to offer you Executive Vice President of Strategic Operations, reporting directly to the board while we search for a new CEO. Unless, he glanced at the other board members, you'd consider the CEO position itself. My heart stopped. CEO. At 32. It was unheard of, impossible. Everything I'd never dared dream. That's insane. Vivian found her voice again. She's nobody. A nothing from nowhere with no connections, no breeding, no trust fund forcing the board's hand. Margaret finished. No blackmail material, no toxic influence, just talent, integrity, and the courage to stand up to corruption, exactly what Horizon needs. Security appeared at the door, real FBI agents, not corporate security. Vivian Prescott, you're under arrest for embezzlement, wire fraud, and conspiracy. You have the right to remain silent. As they led her away, Vivian turned back one last time. Her perfect makeup was smeared, her designer suit wrinkled, her carefully constructed world in ruins. You think you've won? You'll never belong in our world. Never. You're right, I said quietly. I'll never belong in your world. But your world just ended. The handcuffs clicked shut, and she was gone. Daniel gathered his things slowly, looking relieved, more than devastated. The Malaysian deal you solved, he said to me quietly. That framework. I knew it was yours. I should have stood up for you then. I'm sorry. He left with dignity, and I was alone with the board, my future hanging in the balance. So, Margaret smiled, the first genuine warmth I'd seen from her. CEO or EVP, you've earned the right to choose. 6 months later, I stood in the same boardroom where my career had nearly ended, but now the nameplate read, Emily Rhodes, Chief Executive Officer. The view from the 40th floor looked different when it belonged to you, not through inheritance or marriage, but through surviving the fire and emerging stronger. The transition hadn't been smooth. Some old guard executives resigned rather than report to someone they'd watched fetch coffee in the basement. Good riddance. I replaced them with talent that cared more about performance than pedigree, including Maria Gonzalez as head of compliance and 3 of my former team members in senior positions. Vivian Prescott was serving 3 to 5 years in minimum security. Her designer jumpsuit orange instead of cream. The trial had been a media circus, with Patricia's continued coverage ensuring nothing got buried. Vivian's father had publicly disowned her, redirecting the family fortune to legitimate charities and establishing a fund for wrongfully terminated employees. Daniel had surprised everyone by cooperating fully with investigators, testifying against his wife without reservation. He'd lost everything, his position, his reputation, half his assets in the divorce, but seemed lighter for it. Last I heard, he was teaching business ethics at a community college in Wisconsin, living in a 1-bedroom apartment and claiming to be happier than he'd been in years. The company had transformed. We'd implemented the Malaysian deal, launched 2 new international funds, and increased profits by 37%. But more importantly, we'd changed the culture. The old boys club atmosphere was gone, replaced by something that actually resembled meritocracy. Anonymous reporting systems protected whistleblowers. Promotion committees included diverse voices. And anyone who tried to use connections over competence found themselves updating their resume. My office, Daniel's former corner suite, had been redecorated. Gone were the hunting prints and leather-bound books no one read. Instead, the walls held photos of every team that had contributed to our turnaround, awards for workplace excellence, and one framed item I looked at every morning. The original rejection letter from Horizon's HR department 5 years ago, telling me I lacked the appropriate background for corporate finance. Margaret Hall knocked and entered, now chair of the board and my closest advisor. The journal wants to do a profile, from the basement to the boardroom, the Emily Rhodes story. Pass, I said immediately. This was never about me getting famous. Then what was it about? I thought about that question, looking out at Chicago's skyline, proving that the system can change, that talent matters more than last names, that someone from nowhere can reshape somewhere. Speaking of which, Margaret smiled. Your father called. He wanted to know if the new CEO position came with better coffee than the basement. I laughed, remembering how I'd called him that horrible night after my demotion, crying for the first time in years. He'd simply said, "Baby girl, they can knock you down, but they can't keep you down unless you let them." My assistant knocked. Jake, a brilliant kid from the South Side who reminded me of myself 5 years ago. Ms. Rhodes, the scholarship committee is here for the interview. Right. The Emily Rhodes Foundation, funded by the damages from my wrongful termination suit. Full rides to college for kids from working-class families, plus internships at Horizon. Vivian's forced donations had accidentally created something beautiful. As the committee filed in, all former victims of Vivian's reign, I thought about power. Real power wasn't inherited or married into. It wasn't about keeping others down to maintain your position. It was about lifting others up, creating opportunities, changing systems from within. Before we start, I said to the committee, I want to share something. 3 months ago, I got a letter from a girl in Detroit. Parents work factory jobs. Brilliant mind, accepted to Wharton but couldn't afford it. She wrote, I saw what you did. I know where you came from. If you could do it, maybe I can too. That letter sat framed on my desk, next to the rejection letter. 2 bookends to a journey that almost destroyed me. We're funding her education, I continued, and 20 others like her this year, because the best revenge isn't just success, it's making sure the Vivian Prescotts of the world never have that power again. The meeting began, but my mind wandered to that moment in the shareholders' meeting when everything changed. When I stood up, raised my hand, and refused to let privilege win over principle. It could have ended differently. I could have been destroyed completely. Another casualty in Vivian's wake. But I wasn't. Because somewhere along the way, I'd learned the most important lesson of all. They can take your position, your title, your office. They can humiliate you, isolate you, threaten everything you love. But they can't take your truth, your talent, or your refusal to surrender. As I walked out of the meeting that evening, the setting sun painted the Chicago sky gold. My phone buzzed with a text from my father. Saw the quarterly reports. Not bad for a girl from nowhere. I smiled, thinking of my response. But first, I had one more meeting with 3 young women who'd just filed harassment complaints against their supervisor. They were scared, worried about retaliation, unsure if speaking up was worth the risk. I'd tell them what Margaret Hall had told me in that dark cubicle. Make yourself indispensable, then make yourself unstoppable. Because in the end, that's what this story was about. Not revenge, though that was satisfying. Not justice, though that was necessary. It was about proving that sometimes, just sometimes, the system can be beaten by someone who refuses to break. When I walked out of that boardroom years ago, I thought they'd won. But they'd only won if I'd quit. And I didn't quit. I didn't run. I stood my ground, gathered my evidence, and when the moment came, I spoke my truth to power. And power, it turns out, is only as strong as the lies holding it up. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop a comment below, and let's connect. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts. What would you have done in Emily's situation? Your stories and perspectives mean everything to this community. Until next time, remember, never let anyone dim your light.